Hi everyone, welcome back. Let's get started by reviewing what we learned last time. And remember to whisper your answers. Here we go. What is a simile? Did you remember? A simile is when we compare two things, and there is more to that. Do these two things usually have just one main thing in common, or are they usually alike in many ways? They usually just have one main thing in common, but other than that, they are usually very different. What are the two small but important words that we use in similes? We use either the word like or as in a simile. Those words help to make the comparison. And take a look at our poster again. A simile is a comparison of two things using like or as. And remember the example, his teeth are as white as snow. Teeth and snow are quite different except that they are white. And this simile happens to use the word as. Another question for you. Why would someone say a simile or write one in a piece of writing? Similes help to make a sentence more interesting. It makes a clearer picture in our minds and it helps to make a stronger point about something. Let's take a look at this story. I'll read it aloud and you can follow along and be on the lookout for a simile. It says, Sam got to hold his new baby cousin. She was so tiny and cute. She slept soundly in his arms for a few minutes. Then she started squirming and fussing quietly. But very quickly she started crying as loud as a siren. Sam was surprised how loud a tiny baby could cry. Okay, which sentence has a simile in it? This sentence, where it says she was crying as loud as a siren. And what two things are being compared here? The baby's crying is being compared to a siren. Why would these two things be compared? What do they have in common? They are both loud, and it makes it more interesting and gives me a clearer picture in my head of what it sounded like instead of just saying the baby started crying loudly. Take a look at this simile again. What is that little comparison word used? The word as is used here, loud as a siren. Let's take a look at this sentence from the story. It says, she was so tiny and cute. Is that a simile too? No, it's just describing something with an adjective, so that does not make it a simile. Okay, if we would have said something like she was as tiny as a doll or something, that would be a simile because it's comparing two things. I want to point out something about similes. When you write a simile, you can exaggerate a bit, like saying a baby's as loud as a siren. That's an exaggeration, right? You've probably heard a siren, maybe even really close by, and a siren would actually be a lot louder than a baby. But it works well as a simile, even if it is exaggerated. Or remember last lesson we saw a simile that said, my brother is as slow-moving as a snail when he gets ready for school, and that's certainly exaggerated. We all know a snail is actually much slower than a kid. So a simile can be exaggerated and even a bit funny, as long as it makes sense. When you write a simile, you have to pick something to compare it to that obviously has a given trait. So to write a simile for a baby's loud crying, the comparison was to a siren, because that's definitely loud. The roar of a lion is loud, so you could say loud as a lion's roar, or loud as a fire alarm, or something like that. You would not want to pick something that's sort of loud or might be loud, like as loud as a DVD or as loud as a bird. DVDs and birds sometimes can be very loud, but those things don't really come to mind when we think of the word loud. So those similes would not be very clear and just wouldn't make as much sense. Okay, so now I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to whisper yes if it's a simile that makes sense, even if it's exaggerated, or whisper no if the simile just doesn't really make sense. Ready? He is as tall as a skyscraper. Yes, that makes sense. It's obvious that skyscrapers are tall, so even though this is certainly exaggerated, it's a simile that makes sense. Okay, how about this one? The baby's skin is soft like bushes. No, some bushes might be soft, but many are not. And bushes just they aren't really a good example of something that is soft. So what is something that is obviously soft? The baby's skin is soft like... If you thought of something like soft like silk or like a rose petal, something like that, that would work better. How about this one? Whisper yes or no. When Pam tripped over her chair, she turned as red as a car. No, even though a car could be red, it's not a good example of something that's obviously red. Let's try this one. When Pam tripped over her chair, she turned as red as a tomato. Yes, much better. Tomatoes are obviously red, and when she was embarrassed, she turned red. We could also have said as red as a strawberry or as red as a fire engine or something very red like that. Okay, everybody, that's all I have for us today. Before you see the next video lesson, you are going to start planning your simile poem. Please complete numbers 1 and 2 on the page called Monster Simile Poem. This will either be an online digital assignment or on paper, and then your teacher will check over your work. Bye, everyone. I'll see you next time.